Hey, it's good to be back with you, and today I'm excited because I have a couple of, an old friend and a new friend with me for today's conversation. First of all, let me introduce my new friend. This is Ryan Hartwig. Ryan, it's good to have you with us today.
Thanks, Tony. Great to be with you as well.
And the old friend, this has nothing to do with your age, Warren, but we've known each other for a while. This is Warren Bird as well. Warren, good to have you.
Hey, great to be here, and I love working with young guys like Ryan and that youthful Tony Morgan.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm excited about today's conversation because this is a topic that I'm just very passionate about because I've seen the importance of how healthy senior leadership teams really impact the overall health of the church. And Ryan and Warren are coming out with this new book. It's called Teams That Thrive, and it's all about this topic, right, Ryan?
Absolutely, yes. We're talking about church leadership teams and trying to help teams that are struggling or maybe not quite at the optimal level figure out how to thrive, how to be healthy, how to be effective, and help their churches to be the same.
Yeah, and the big surprise is that so many teams that, they're okay, they just assume that's as good as you get. And we found, no, you have so much more potential as a team than you realize. You got all these great brains and talent and abilities. If you could do a few things differently, you would just have a much bigger impact.
So I know both of you are researchers, and so I'm curious. I'm guessing there's some data that is supporting the content of this book. Can you share a little bit about what you uncovered that you've included in the content of this book on teams?
Well, Ryan, you say that, but I'll just say, Tony, you helped us find it. That on your blog a while back, we did this survey where we said, hey, would you like us to assess your team? And we got this special deal with this Harvard group of this team assessment. If you'd like a complimentary assessment to kind of know how you rank against other teams, let us know. And that was part of what became a big group that we studied. Ryan, why don't you say a little more?
Yeah, so ultimately we heard from over 1,000 members of senior leadership teams all around the country and really all around the world. And so we asked leadership teams to do this assessment together. And so we gave them two assessments. One was the team diagnostic survey, which comes out of Harvard, probably the best leadership team diagnostic that's out there. And so we asked all the team members to fill that out. And then we also gave them our own survey. We had 145 teams that completed all of that. So we had a really, really robust data set that we were able to look at. And so we got all that data, and then we started to crunch all those numbers and drew in some of my friends who are statisticians and really said, okay, what can we learn from this data? We feel like we were able to find a lot of really interesting things and kind of cut through a lot of the clutter, I think, that's out there. There's a lot about teams, but really trying to hone in on a few key disciplines that tend to make quite a difference.
That's fantastic. Now, I'm guessing in all of that, you uncovered some surprises, some things that really distinguish healthy teams and healthy organizations from the rest of the pack. I don't want you to give away everything in the book, but can you highlight a couple of things that really jumped out at you?
Well, actually, we do want to give away everything in the book. There's a website, teamsthatthrivebook.com, and we give, the opening chapter, and we got a bunch of tools and everything, so we do want to give it away. But that said, we can't cover all the principles in one interview. Ryan, why don't you pick one?
Yeah, I pick one, and that's just about purpose. So I think, we tend to think that lots of leadership team members said, hey, what we're doing is really, really important. And so we part of our assessment was look at how consequential, clear, and compelling do members find their purpose. And so we found that consequentiality, right, the importance, the feeling like that what we're doing just matters incredibly, was really, really high. It was actually one of the highest indicators in all of the data. But the clarity and the challenge of that, like really understanding what that purpose is, was one of the lowest raters. So I thought that was really interesting, is that we have this amorphous sense that what we're doing is really important, but we really don't know very clearly what is it that we have to do as a senior leadership team. What we found, I think, is consistent with some of the things you found, Tony, that a leadership team that really sets out strategy and really is making these key strategic decisions for their churches are those that tend to perform really, really well. But they have a lot of clarity around this is what we exist to do, rather than some of these other things.
Yeah. Tony, just a case in point, so many teams, when we ask them, what's the purpose of your team? They gave the same purpose as the church's purpose. And it's like, well, are you trying to do everything in the church? Don't you see what's unique about what you contribute? And many of them don't or didn't.
Yeah, and so I guess we've been on a similar path here. Some research that the Unstuck group did about 6 months ago looked at this very issue, Ryan, and what we found is the teams that had both clarity of vision and then how those expectations are shared then at that senior leadership team level. Not only do you get a healthier team, but you get a healthier church. We found that those churches are growing the fastest, and they're the healthiest of all the churches too. So it's interesting to see some parallel tracks here and how they're coming together.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's why we wrote this. Is I think our thought was that healthy teams lead healthy organizations. And so if we can help these teams to be really, really healthy, to be effective, then that's going to translate into better congregations, healthier congregations, and good things.
Yeah. Warren, was there a surprise for you that jumped out from your research?
Well, it was how loose teams are. We asked people, how many people are on your church's senior leadership team? And more than half didn't agree with the amount of people, which on the one hand said there's a healthy fluidity that, we bring in this resource person first season because we're doing this project. We need to add this person to the team. That's great. But the fact that there wasn't kind of clarity of who does what and who actually is making what decision really was a surprise and really troubled us. The other thing that surprised me was how many people thought that their chief end was to advise the senior pastor rather than who will then make the decision, rather than to decide together and own the decision together and then implement it together, which makes so much more sense. But we just found a lot of churches didn't do it that way.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, that's something we're finding and working with churches that for some, it's almost a theological shift that needs to take place where they're not presuming that it's only the senior pastor that hears from the voice of God and develops vision and direction for the church. Frankly, when I look at New Testament and how God designed the body of Christ, it wasn't for one person to have all the knowledge, all the wisdom, all the gifts, but for a group of people to come together. And in that, we have strength and health as a church body. And so I think the more that we can shift perception there and encourage teams to collaborate in how they design their future and then the next steps they pursue, the healthier churches are going to be as well.
And to that point, Tony, we actually did a whole chapter on the biblical roots of team ministry, just for those who want to say, well, now, is this really biblical? Shouldn't it always be Moses going up on the mountain, getting the vision and coming down and delivering it? And while that did occur, there are an awful lot of verses, concepts, metaphors, and teachings that really strongly argue for this team approach.
So, Ryan, I'm curious, after pulling this book together, and obviously we want to help you sell a lot of books, but what are you hoping that church teams are going to do as far as next steps based on what you guys have offered in this great resource?
Ideally, church leadership teams would grab the book and they would just work through the book together. Every chapter has reflection and discussion questions. And we tried to set it up that a church could just walk through this over a course of 10, 12 weeks and just a little bit at a time and think through how can we actually change our team. So I think for us, we're thinking, okay, wherever you are on the team, wherever that dial is, can we help you to shift it just a little bit, to help you become a little bit better and then gain some momentum from that, and then get a little bit better and then get a little bit better, and so on. So that's really what we're hoping that folks will do. In fact, one of the things that we're going to offer in the first 2 weeks when the book comes out is a supplementary guide. We're calling it How to Have a New Team by Friday, 5 Fridays by now. And really, it's just a 5-week workbook that a church team can go through together. It references the book, kind of tells folks what to read at what times and what to do. Hopefully that after 5 weeks, a church team could see some significant differences and feel that, yes, we're making some progress. Let's continue to invest here, continue to help us become as effective and as thriving as we possibly can be.
Hey, Ryan, you keep holding up the book. the doorbell rang just before as this call was starting, and my wife just slipped me this. I haven't even cracked the cover, but there it is, making its debut into my hand, even as we're doing this interview.
That's great. That's like Amazon's yesterday delivery. Awesome. Well, guys, it's an honor and privilege to be able to have the conversation, but also, again, the topic is so important for churches, and I'm glad to hear that you're putting some practical tools in the hands of church leaders. And I'd offer too, I mean, if as you dive through this conversation, you just get to a place where you feel stuck, you're not sure the direction you can take. This is one of those key areas where the Unstuck group focuses on helping churches looking at their staffing and their structure. And one of the key principles, obviously, that we use as we look at a church's structure is who's on that senior leadership team and what are the key roles that that team absolutely has to engage. Otherwise, the church isn't going to be healthy. Again, the name of the book here is Teams That Thrive. And Ryan and Warren, other than Amazon, do you have any? And Warren, can you give us the name of the website again?
TeamsThatThriveBook.com. But Tony, you need to talk about your book, Taking the Lid Off of, help me with the title, because it's a really good book. And in fact, when we saw it, I'm like, more needs to be done on this. And that was one of the inspirations for the research that this became. So mention your book, please.
It's Take the Lid Off the Church, and it's an ebook that will introduce the topic. But again, the research that Ryan and Warren have done, it's extensive, and it helps take that conversation to the next level. So guys, thank you again for joining me today.
Thank you.
Great to chat with you, always.